So, as a way of introduction, you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and the various ways that you would like us to know about the work that you do, but most especially your involvement in wine, and we can segue that to when did you get started into this industry of food and wine, and what was that like? Yeah.
Good.
You have a mic?
I can talk while seated.
Yeah, please do.
I have a very big voice, so and that. Once in a while I don't use it because
Okay,
if I use it, may cause.
Because we are recording it, so
Okay.
so it can be at least clear for.
Okay. Is that fine? Good. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alphan, a grandfather, a father, a husband, a uncle. What else am I? And I am 71 years old as of today. I am a retired accountant. I've worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers for all my life, and that was about 36 years. I joined from the university and I left when I was leading the consulting business in Kenya. That's the position that I retired with. So most of my life, and that is 10 years ago, most of my life I spent in the accounting world, initially as an auditor, which is surprising because I'm not that boring, and auditors are supposed to be very boring people. Then from auditing, I started doing consulting. Consulting is the other side where you sort of assist people, and there's a rumor that consultants, they come and tell you, do you have a watch? Then you say yes. Can I borrow it? Then once they borrow it, they'll tell you the time, and they'll charge you for that. It is your watch. But because you didn't notice what he wanted to ask you, you gave him. And after that, he will charge you a fee. That's what I did at the time of retirement. In terms of what else have I done, I've always been interested in business. I think even the PK will be surprised to know that I used to run a chemist for 10 years. One in Buruburu and one in Embu. So I've not done chemist. I've been a distributor of sodas, both in Nairobi and Embu. What else have I done? I have been involved in real estate. I've been involved in some business in gas. Some of my businesses have, of course, collapsed. Others have succeeded. But that is all there is in business. So as you young people start business, know that not all of them will succeed. Some will succeed, others will fail. And until you try, you never know which one will succeed. So I feel very unhappy when somebody starts one project. When it fails, he despairs or she despairs. That's a very wrong way of doing things. My pharmacy business ran for 10 years. And by the time I closed it, I had got broke because my partner stole all the money. Who was the pharmacy? But that didn't mean I will not do business again with people, because you can't do it alone. So that's part of my background. Now let me tell you how I started on wine, which is more interesting for you. Wine is something I didn't know when I was growing up. And also at the time we were growing up, wine was very expensive. Basically because the wines could get was only from Europe. It was the French, Spanish, Italian, bit of Portuguese, which was very, very expensive. So until about 1994, when there were some democratic elections in South Africa, and wine started coming here, wine was very expensive. Only the very rich. And when I say very rich, it was very rich. Because even me as a partner in PwC, we used to find it a bit expensive to drink wine. But after 1994, when the South African market brought the wine here, even the European had dropped the market and dropped the prices because there was enough wine to circulate. So one of the things we can give credit for the wine industry in Kenya was the emergency of the South African wine here. Wine reduced prices by at least 25% because of that. So in other words, I didn't know much about wine when I was growing up because it was too expensive. Now, part of the system, when my children were growing up, I took them to South Africa, and they joined University of Cape Town. And while I'm going to see them, I started going around tasting wines. Literally, I didn't know what tasting around. We would go and just drink and get drunk and say we have tasted, which was really not tasting. And that's how I started learning about wine. The interest was because I was going to South and there was a lot of wine going around, and I would go around and taste a bit of it. So because of that, I developed a liking and an interest for wine. So how did I get involved in wine then? One of these days when we went for wine tasting, we went to a farm. And as we were tasting, the wine maker was a lady called Catherine Marshall. And she were talking, she said, we have a club here that for people who like wines, they join. So after that I asked her, that club, what does it really, what do you do? She told me you just have to pay some 25,000, I think it was 25 or 5,000 rand, which is multiplied by 7, it's about 50,000 shillings. And once you do that, you get, we produce some wine and then you get wine for drinking. So that's why I joined it. So I joined it because I wanted to be drinking wine for at the end of the year. We would make wine and then we get each 2 crates or something. And that was how I joined. I started with Catherine Marshall. After I retired, I looked at it and said, why can't we make this some business? Because now I had enough time to think about what else we could do. So it is after that I started talking to her that why don't we change this? Instead of being a club, why don't we make it a commercial business? So we had some very old people who are mostly expatriates. When I mean expatriates, I mean expatriates from South Africa. Those were people who are not living there. Most of them were Zungus. So, because those were too old, some of them say they are not interested. So those who are interested, we decided, let's put it on money. And we put in money, and then we transformed the club into a business. So now we're running what I would call a modest business. A company that our sales about 10 million rand. 10 million rand is about 70 million Kenyan shillings. And most of our products we sell, 60% are sold out of South Africa, mostly in Europe, America, and Asia. And 40% is sold in South Africa. We still don't have wine here. We have tried, and we are still trying. So I do hope one of these days, before the end of this year, we may have wine coming here. But that is how I started. And because of that, I'm a director. We are 3 directors. Catherine, the winemaker, and a friend of mine called Greg and Michelle, who is a professor in engineering, and myself as an accountant or something like that. And that's how I am involved in Catherine Marshall. I think that's all I wanted to say about that.
No, that's amazing. That is amazing. I like that you've taken an unlinear journey, but just following the next step and the next step.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll hear more about, this part of your life, the post-retirement and wine involvement. Jebet, karibu sana. It's nice to be sitting next to you. We're always sitting across from each other, and I really enjoy your how you present wines. But for purposes of today, would you please maybe give us a little bit of background in terms of how you became involved in wine? Give us a small introduction of how you'd like us to know you, and yeah.
Thanks, Wendy and Wanjiro and everyone. I'm impressed. Congrats, Wanjiro, for this is a process of instituting the wine sector in Kenya. So you've consolidated us, and that's kind of founding in itself. And there are other institutors, but now she's consolidated us in this session. So my name is Jebet Chemgorem. I wear few hats, but essentially I'm an entrepreneur. I was doing a business for 16 years. I ran my company for 16 years before I joined the family business. So I'm second generation in the family business. I'm the newbie and the new kid. But when I was a kid, in our house, we had wine everywhere, like in the kitchen, in the sitting room, in the dining. So when guys came to visit, they're like, which was really unusual. So evidently, I'm starting the process of just sharing about my dad. So I'm second generation. I'm a post-COVID hire. And yes, my father, Paul Chemgorem, he's actually, yes, he's my dad, but really, he's really admirable. And every time we sit amongst people, there are stories, new stories, they just keep adding. Like, I didn't know this, I didn't know this. So you have to make a date with him. He's really passionate. When we were kids, whether we're going to a kibanda for lunch or a proper restaurant, he used to go to the counter, do you have my wine? And he just, that was his style. So in terms of, I don't know how you want to structure this, but in terms of an introduction, I can just do that part as an introduction. Because he's the one I'm representing today, I would read out his journey, if you will allow it, at a certain point already.
Even now, because I think you've already mentioned your second generation.
Yes.
So if you can give us the first gen context,
Yes.
I think that's okay.
Okay, so as we're putting this together, I was so excited because this is even foundational for anyone. I had someone who's doing, who wants to plant grapes. So again, it's hard to get, but if you find him, it's worth it. It's worth it. Yeah, I'm one of those people who needs glasses. And like Alphan, I won't be declaring my age. But I have no problem with it. So, yeah, it's really a privilege, to be honest, to sit here. And so I'm the firstborn, and I'm now in the business. It was, Domain Kenya is almost 100% family business. And I was the one who came in not so long ago, but we are all in and we are riding this ship together, which is super exciting. So for him, I think now I can start with his story where he made, my dad is admirable. Yes, he's my dad, but he's really admirable because he was shifting things. You know, when you can just go and find dry land and then you see it's possible to do a forest here. So I think that's one of the things that was interesting about his story. So he came from Forex, used to work for CBK. So that's where his story began. He didn't plan on wine. And in the early 70s, anyway, he's a friend of yours. Yeah, they are peers. We have many stories that they keep reminding each other. So he says he didn't plan in wine. In the early 70s, he was working at Central Bank, foreign exchange. So Qual was forming, Qual came up in 1969 to take over the importation and distribution of wines. There was something that was passed in Parliament that now we will do it all from one point. and Kwal was the one that was designated to do that. So the government was looking for someone to navigate foreign currencies from rubles to yen. So for him, he says, me, I didn't look for a job. They came, they said, come, you can do this job in Forex, because he really dealt with all that currency. So they said, but we are not going to, we know you're getting paid well, but we're not going to pay you that much, but we'll take you to Europe. So he thought, that's a deal. I'll go to Europe. And that's back in the day. So that was acceptable to him. And he said, we might not afford you your salary, but we'll take you to Europe. And that's the promise that they kept. So he joined Kwal as a senior clerk in accounts. Now from here I will read. Allow me to read. So after a year in that department, he was moved to duty free. And there they were doing cigars and perfumes with the diplomatic community. And in that, he was able to help even they added confectionery, perfumes, all kinds of things. And I remember even when we were young, they had managed to even expand, because it was finding ways to expand the what you call the wine market. So they spread into East Africa, and that really worked out for them. Yeah. Later you can ask questions, then I'll answer in a really flowing way. Huh? Yes. So behind the numbers and networking, by the way, the diplomatic department that he worked in really helped him in building connections. So I always wondered, how do you have so many friends of so many types? Like literally, it's across the board. So he said it was especially because of this season. That's where a lot of networks were formed. Yeah. And now from there, he ended up being moved into production. Now for him, production was his thing, because he liked machines from the time he was a kid. Now there were machines. So that caught his attention really well. So being drawn to machines, he had a chance to apprentice under an expatriate manager. And his passion just allowed him to really fit in, and the expatriate did his work and left, and he now handled production, the production department in a management role. So the title of the next is Of Purpose and Possibilities. I don't know how many of you are old enough to know papaya wine.
Yes.
Hey, declarations.
Some of us.
Yeah, papaya wine was a Kenyan wine, and I'll tell you the story. So what happened is Paul, I'll call him Paul, was mentored by Nigel Pavitt. Nigel Pavitt was hired to run Kenya Wine Agencies. He was an ex-military captain, and so he came with his military approach to the system. And so and they built the company, but he was mentored by him. So as they were playing with Forex, because he was still a serious resource in Forex, they said, hey, if we keep importing, it's tight. Let's figure out ways to produce locally. So together with Captain Nigel Pavitt, a gentleman called Gerald Taylor, together with him, they embarked on an unlikely mission of making wine with tropical fruits. After research across the country, they found certain places that purpose were doing well. And that was in Kambogi, in Kisumu, in Makueni, and in Marigat. The purpose were really, and they landed on purpose because it's a tropical fruit. It ran all year round, unlike other fruits. So they had done research and they found purpose is a year-long product. So you can see the sustainability conversation here. Yes. So the next challenge was extracting the juice. The team imported equipment from US and set up a factory in Marigat. That's where actually Marigat, the soils were most ideal. That was the outcome of the research. They actually did some, there was research which was done before, and then the research that they used that they actually carried out themselves. So they they developed the commercial purple facility and produced a dry white wine. And what was interesting is that this dry white wine was, I think the laws around defining what wine was were not, I don't know how it was working back then, but it looked like it passed that. So when it was tried in France, there's a Frenchman who tested it. It was a blind tasting in Europe, tried it, and he thought it was a Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah, so you can imagine how well produced that wine was. It was really well produced for an expatriate in industry to, make the mistake of it for being a Sauv Blanc. And I think it just goes to speak on, I think in Kenya, when we put our heads to it, we make it work somehow. So this wine received a Global International Award, which is a Silver Monde selection in Brussels. And then they also produced a sweet Riesling as well, and it won an award in Portugal. So this is back in the day when, this is without influence. There's no one you can influence, especially from the Africa point. No one is quick to celebrate African outcomes. So they really cut through a lot of issues to be able to show up and win awards. So with purpose, they had excess. So they decided to sell the juice to schools. Then they also did jams. They created jams and sold them to Uchumi, which was an investment that also Kwal made. So Uchumi thrived because they made an investment in them and they also grew. It was one of their projects. And then the skins were used to, as well, they also sold to breweries for papain. It's actually a raw ingredient. And then they were approached by a French perfumer. He said, when I was talking to him, he said, it's those companies. I don't know what it's called. Is it? I said, Chanel? No, not that one. I said, Christian Dior? No, but those ones. So he said, those ones. They approached them. He said, he can't remember the name of that perfumery. Approached it because the seed oil is used in perfume making, but they couldn't match the volume, so that transaction they couldn't pull through. So that's at least on that part. Are there any questions so that I don't hear my voice through this? Or do you want to interrupt briefly?
Maybe as an observation, that how many people knew of that story before right now? Of a Sauvignon Blanc from Popo? Right?
Let me say I've
One person.
that wine.
One person out of a room full of industry people. And anyway, this is just to say that I think for everything that we do, let's be intentional about documenting our processes, our innovations, our wins, and our, the ways we find that not work and that work. Because if Paul had done this many decades ago, and we don't know about it, we think it's never been done, right? So as we go around through our different ways of doing the work that we do, maybe that's a good thing to keep in mind. Like, how do we document the work that we do so that the next generation, as we're talking about legacy, the next generation doesn't have to solve the same problems that we already did. But yes, please proceed.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, yeah, please.
Can you go back to the part of Riesling? Sorry, let's see.
She's asking, can we go back to the part of Riesling? He said, besides the Popo, they also what they did is they bought extract of Riesling and then produced it. So they did not grow the plants, they actually imported the extract and then now went on to produce a semi-sweet Riesling. Yeah, good question.
So let me also maybe move you along a little bit to say, coming from that legacy, what would you say you're leaning on to the work that your family has done. I know your dad and even your mom has also been involved in the business. And what is that thing that you are injecting as a post-COVID hire to Domain Wines? And how are you positioning it maybe for, the next generation, if I can say that?
Okay. Gosh, that's a direct. Okay, so in short, what I can say is that the strengths that I found in Domain were that it's the intrinsic that I meant, that I pointed out there. There's so much depth in the know-how at the time that I joined. The passion and the know-how of everyone. They just had so much information about wine. And I think that's something that I hope for us to even further institute, because we are humans, and humans, we want experience. So if you can go on safari and the safari takes you even to the to understand even the rock, that would be really interesting. I think we crave, humans, we crave knowledge, and I feel that we can be a conduit in unpacking that knowledge for a more full life experience as a wine drinker as well. So have I answered?
Yes, I think so. Like it goes beyond the business into, the philosophy of living. Yeah, which I really admire. Mr. Njero,
Yes.
I'm glad you've shared that, you're currently looking at getting the wines into the Kenyan market.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, what that journey looks like,
Yeah.
and what the inspiration for that is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because we've been on this journey trying to bring wines in Kenya for the last 3 years. And some of the major difficulties we have is the bureaucracy. The KRA and Kenya Bureau of Standards, name anybody. There are so many roadblocks that if you are a company that is run in a manner that is very difficult to bribe. And obviously, I, coming from a very professional background, I've been brought up in the PwC world. I just can't see why I should bribe a government official to do what he should be doing, because he's paid for it, and I pay taxes. So because of that conviction, we've not bribed anybody. And because of that, obviously, we haven't moved far. Other than the bribing aspect, there is also the logistics. Wine, Jebet will tell you, wine is also very difficult to bring around, because if you come with a vehicle, it is disturbed. Wine is like an animal. It's alive. If it's disturbed a lot, when you bring it here, it will take a long while to settle down, and then you can sell. So you really must know what equipment will bring it here. The best way is to fly, because with that there is little disturbance. The wine comes as he left it, and you can sell it almost immediately. But if it comes by road, and our roads are not that good, they are all potholes, so it is hate and it disturbs. That's also another issue. So my view is that you require a lot of determination, a lot of tenacity to be able to bring it here, and also if we all fight, and that's one of the reasons I like Domain, is to fight for your right, and show people that business can be done without that bribe. It's also, I think, something we are contributing to this society. So we'll wait, and hopefully it will come.
Wow. Standing on business and principle. No, I really admire that, and thank you for that. I see our Madam Principal giving me an eye. So I'll try and squeeze in, or rather leave some room for questions, right? And I think this should have been like a 2-hour conversation. But in the interest of letting all of you have a chance to ask a question, let me go straight to probably the heart of this, yeah, which is thinking about, so we've looked at where we've come from and some of the challenges that we're currently dealing with, but because we are building for the future, when people reflect, say in 2050, now last 20 years, what legacy would you like your work to have created? So it could be in terms of the business, professional standards, community impact, or just the industry. If we can cast our eyes way into the future. Who wants to go first?
I can just jump in.
Yes, please.
Because it's simple. It's for us, it's going deep in terms of the wine knowledge, and also to continue to expose people to really good wines because of his reputation and how, in fact, on the board there's a book he's also been talked about. If anyone knows South African wines, you have John Platter. He produces this annual booklets. So he wrote about Paul. There's a chapter that talks about him, as well as Kenya and wine and the journey of wine, with also a few other people, including, yeah, you can see him there. Even took him to Cabernet. The other pictures are not related. This is this year at the wine fairs. So the wish is to go forward in unpacking the nuances of wine, celebrating good winemaking. Yes, we do Europe, but if we produce here, let us celebrate really high quality and professionalism. And something that he says that's really interesting is, over time, is that we stay healthy while doing the business, because it can easily crush us if you're not careful. Yes, so that's my answer to that.
Thank you. I think my way I look at is to increase the knowledge of wine, and that's why I'm very happy with what Irene is doing, to make sure that people really do understand what wine is. So the education of wine is very important, because people, and I think we can tell you, in Europe, whenever you have any meal except breakfast, and okay, maybe you're rich, you can have the champagne. But in Europe, every lunch, dinner, you must have a glass of wine. And it is important that we also learn to understand that wine is part of the food. So if all of us could understand what wine contributes to good living, that would be a very good thing that I would want to live this world with. Of course, I'll make money if everybody drinks wine. But the point is, let people understand what wine is all about. The other point is to have enough and adequate variety of wines. Because some of the problems we have in Kenya is that, okay, the last 5 years I've seen quite a number of wines coming in, and so that's not a very big issue. But when I was growing up, some of the wines that you could only get were the wines, the casket, which is really not really good wine, but I mean, it's drinkable. But you can't base your wine on the cheap side of the wine. So I think the variety, the quality of wine coming into Kenya should improve. And of course, as a consumer, also the price needs to remain in a manner that is sustainable. So I see a situation where there should be wines that are expensive and at the top, that those people who can afford can drink. But we also need a lot of wine, the middle level, where all of us can afford a bottle. So that's another thing that I would want to see, where we have wines of medium price, maybe from about 2,000 to 4,000. We have a lot of that in the market. And then those who have the wherewithal, they can buy the expensive one. So we'd love to see that. And also I've talked about the knowledge of wine, making sure that people don't overdrink it. And also people, because I come from a Christian background where people tend to think drinking alcohol is a sin. And you really can't see that in If you read the Bible very well, you can't see anywhere like that. So we need to educate even the religious people. I go to church and the preacher starts by saying, yeah, I've never drink it. So you sort of feel, is he really addressing people of this century or what he's talking about? So that's another thing, in my view, that should be brought to the attention of the Kenyans. Because if you go to Europe, you go to America, or even to South Africa, where I go in South Africa, the church I go on Christmas, we have wine in the church after the service. Instead of people going for tea, some people will be given tea, others will be given a good melon, a good cup. That's how life should be. That people understand where wine is coming from. It's not just for the drunkard. It's part of the meal that you drink water on while you are eating. Thank you very much.
2050, here we come. So I think I'll open the floor to.
So is there room? There was a mic on the floor. Was there a mic?
And as we locate that mic, Jebet, you have something to add?
Yes. I wanted to wedge in because right now I'm speaking on behalf of.
Yes.
If I can just do 2 paragraphs
That's okay.
that would answer the questions for people who want to do winemaking. Because I found that story really fascinating. So in short, after they did the purple, they now went into grapes. And now it was a question of what grapes. So they imported, they also did research as to which places in Kenya. Before there were 2 winemakers. There was a gentleman called John Dollier who they supported when they were starting at first, before they decided to go off on their own. So when they did the research, they looked where can wine thrive in Kenya. So John Dollier's farm was in Naivasha, but then they also found that Juja can work, Meru, Ngong Hills, and also Yatta. So this is just I'm sharing this for. You don't want to walk away without this data.
Is this your shago?
Yeah, the people who want to produce. And then now the issue was the other places were good, but the place with the best climate was Yatta, where there is a vineyard here. They established the vineyard there. The only challenge was that the rainfall was low. But they didn't need to keep adding line. It held on, and they produced enough sugar. The sun was enough for the sugars to reach what they call the brick levels that would be good for fermenting wine. So they constructed a dam and then imported 11 disease-free stock from South Africa. And they were told it's not possible. You forget about it. It's not gonna grow. All of them thrived. All. So there was the Cab Sauv, Shiraz, Pinotage, Colombard, Chenin, Chardonnay. He talked of Cabernet Ruby. Those days, I don't know if you ever. Yeah, but the vineyard flourished, but they decided to pursue now Colombard. Those who are testing. So they pursued Colombard, which really fascinated seasoned drinkers. It was indistinguishable as in terms of a wine being made elsewhere vis-a-vis here. So in a blind tasting, it really worked out. The other thing that he mentioned that is notable for the people who want to do wine is that they discovered the right time to plant grapes in Kenya. They experimented with different times, and they were finding that at the end of it, the grape was not. You have to. They were establishing a whole new cycle. You have the European cycle, but here we're in the tropics. So there was a bit of research and experimentation until they found that July was the best time to plant, so that it started ripening in February, March, and then that way the right amount of sugar would be generated because of the sun. So I thought it's important to just put out some of those tools that can be useful for the potential wine producers here. Yeah.
No, thank you for that addition. So a quick follow-up is the vineyard in Yatta still
Maybe the choir guys can tell us. But there was they produced and I don't know, but even now, the rootstock is still valuable.
The vineyard is still there,
Yeah.
but it was given to NYS to run it. So Gual is not like fully running.
And I hear they are
The
uprooted.
people with
Some part of it was uprooted, but at some point also NYS took.
Yeah. So, but it was really valuable rootstock, and that rootstock can actually last for over 70 years. Yeah, it is really powerful rootstock. Now I know I'm sharing possibilities here.
They didn't let it go because it was more productive because of the merger between. So it was more of a commercial agreement
Yeah.
because the government sold a lot of its shares. I think part of it including the vineyards. Yeah, because the still came on board, and now we're doing more importation, and it's a long story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I understand. So, but at least the vineyards are still some. This is it's some. If someone wants to do a deal there.
Okay, this is the possibility of old stock.
We'll take 2 questions. I'm sorry. I know a lot of you are like me thinking we need to have a day, right? A day with Alphan, a day with Paul as well. But so 2 questions. Okay, there's one here and 2 there. Okay. I'll take both and then they'll answer.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I missed the discussion regarding the pawpaw or the wine from pawpaws. And the other day I came across a wine made from, of course, it was wine and juice, meaning there was a bit of fermentation, then there was juice. The downside there, that wine had an expiry date, which then becomes very hard to push it. So what happens when you make wine from these fruits? Do you ferment or you just look for the sugar? What was the deal? Maybe enlighten me a bit. I missed that.
Hold on. You'll remember. I will remind you. Right? Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. My question is for you.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you very briefly discussed like logistically getting wine from South Africa to here. You talked about road application being completely out because of the disturbance. Talked about flight being best. I wanted to ask if you were considering seaport at all, and if you could elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other burning one? Okay, thank you. And then you can close.
Okay, so I think we have a question for each of you. So maybe we can start with Alphan
Okay.
on the logistics.
Mine is very easy. Actually, wine is there's no problem in bringing wine with the ship. If you remember, during the COVID, one of the things that happened, because the logistics of the shipping from the major ports became a big issue. We had actually a short supply of wine in most of the world because of that. So in other words, the best way to bring wine is by ship, because the ship you put them in a cool environment. It can take as long as it takes, and it's quite where it is there is not much turbulence in terms of disturbing the wine. So even here, I don't know what Domain do, but even here, if we brought it, say, from Durban or from which is the main big airport, harbor in South Africa, it can come this way. So yeah, ship would be the best to bring. Obviously, the airlifting is very expensive, so you can't do a lot of it with the airlift. It's expensive. So we only left with maybe come with these trucks, and then when it comes to the truck, you have to keep it for about, to me, I think 3 months before you sell it, so that it cools down, it settles down, and it can be good wine.
Okay. Then there was a question on tropical fruit winemaking and expiry and yeah.
Okay, before I even transition, yes, in fact, on sustainability, just this week we were importing, we do shipments from all over the world, but this week we had to do from one of our premium winemakers, Joseph Joao, we need to bring for a client. And they said, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Sustainability issues, we're not using what do you call it? Air freight.
Yeah, friend.
So some wine producers actually reject air freighting their products, and that was really interesting to me. So yeah, so that on the juice. Now, if I can understand this, you have juice,
No,
you have fruit juice.
no. So I call this wine supply. Then you don't ask whether wines have an expiry date, or sometimes they don't have. This particular sweet wine had an expiry date, and then rosé. And then ask why we didn't put an expiry date on the wine. So the answer was Kebs insisted. But as you look at the bottle, it had wine plus juice. So of course then Kebs insists, because of the juice component, then we did an expiry date. And on the expiry date, like the rosé changed color aggressively. You can tell there's a problem. So now the question is, the people who are adding or produced wine, does that bring up the issue of expiry? Is that the future? Is there someone who is dumping juice that had nothing to do with it? Or has anybody else come across wine made with juice and then they have an expiry date?
Okay, I haven't come across that, but the issue of expiry affects us when the wine has low alcohol. So we have two types of wines. So when it has super low alcohol, Kebs demands that it's almost like there's a classification. I'm not in that department, but yeah.
So for Richard, we have two wines at Kwan. So we have Casa Buena, that is a sangria. So our sangria is infused with a bit of wine. So fruit juice infused with a bit of wine. So because of that low alcohol volume, you have to have that expiry date. Just recently, our cap price that did have an expiry date, we have an expiry date on it because now it's fortified. Because before it used to be a proper table wine. Now it's fortified, so we have neutral spirit, and you have a bit of fruit, and you have the grape juice. So if you look at the ingredients, they have a lot of things: stabilizer, some fruit component, some grape, and I'm not a winemaker, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to address that. So sometimes, yes, you have to have that expiry date. And then because of the volume of the package, it's a 1 liter. So sometimes they tell us you have to have that expiry threshold because the tetra doesn't hold very well. Unlike our 5 liter tetras that don't have an expiry date. So there's a chemical element to it, and there's a commercial aspect to it, but it's more of the fruit and the alcohol holding. So how long can it hold for? So ours is about a year and 6-7 months expiring period. So from the date of production. But I think it's a conversation that needs to be really addressed because we're having issues with the trade refusing to buy, and I'm glad the person who's in charge of wines at Kwal is around, and we're having a lot of issues. So maybe we can also throw some questions to her later.
I think he answered it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that's probably all the time we have for this panel. But I'm really glad that there is a networking session at the end of after lunch. So if there's still something that comes to you for the two individuals, don't hesitate to pull them aside and pick their brains. I mean, wealth of information, wealth of experience that we should all take advantage of, right? So thank you so much for being the best audience ever. You guys don't believe me. Okay, you do good, and you're also looking really good from up here. So tuwapigie makofi. Pia mtupigie makofi. We can dance if we don't clap. So thank you, Andiro. That's it for this session.